ain't know when that hot sign blinks. I'm gonna eat everything, ordering fruit from all around the city.
Hi, I'm Chrissy, and this is my supermarket tour. So before I actually go into the store, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my impressions of the book and about what I expect to find once I go on my adventure. Okay, so frankly, after reading this book, I was really shocked. While I am a psychology major, I consider myself a fairly well-rounded individual when it comes to general knowledge about things that are relevant to my life. I've taken biology and nutrition courses in the past, and so I did not expect to be as shocked about what I read as I am right now. Even though I knew about manipulation tactics and strategies used in advertising, I suppose I just didn't realize the extent to which the supermarket chains will go to manipulate consumers into buying their products. The supermarket tour discusses the fact that even though shopping is more convenient today, it is also significantly less personal. Grocery stores resort to consumer manipulation, and this begins the minute you walk in the front doors. From music choices, to point systems, to the allure of a one-stop shopping experience, to poor labeling, to food colors, to shelf placement. There are so many things that consumers are subconsciously being manipulated with, and I will explore these things in more detail when I go into the store. While reading the book, the chapter which made the largest impression on me was the meat aisle chapter. I found that ironic, because even though I'm not a vegetarian, whenever I go into grocery stores regularly, I tend to avoid the meat department. It makes me uncomfortable. It always has. And frankly, reading about the details of it in the supermarket tour made me even more uncomfortable. But that prompted me to ask myself, why am I uncomfortable? And so that discomfort is exactly the reason why I've decided to examine that aisle in more detail. So let me tell you a little bit about what I read. The supermarket tour talks about animal abuse as one of its main topics in the meat aisle section. While I knew that the mass production of meat wasn't the most humane business in the world, I had no idea that factory farms often resort to abusive practices while raising their livestock and preparing them for sale. For example, male chicks are routinely killed because they cannot lay eggs and they are too lean to be sold as meat. Hens are typically shoved into very crowded spaces where they cannot walk or stretch their wings. And even on the way to the slaughterhouses, animals often die in the trucks because they are too hot or too cold, and once they get to the houses, they are hung upside down for hours in pain before they are killed. These practices are simply disgusting, and consumers need to stop thinking of animals merely as commodities. The supermarket tour discusses the fact that society has become increasingly comfortable with this idea, and just views animals as things that need to be bred and bred and bred for our satisfaction, and I think that's true. An issue that will perhaps hit closer to home is the effect that these factory farm practices are having on our own bodies. Antibiotics are routinely given to animals on these farms in order to help stop the spread of disease. Now, the most surprising thing that I read was that though these antibiotics are generally eliminated from their bodies, this is not checked, and that some of them can end up being consumed by us. The same goes for the hormones that the livestock are given. Additionally, animals are frequently fed recycled waste to cut down on the cost of animal feed. This waste may contain drug residues, toxic metals, or even livestock manure. The chemicals that may accumulate in the fat of an animal have concentrations 25 million times greater than that of the natural surrounding environment. There's a huge demand for beef, and beef cattle overgrazing contributes to desertification, as well as an increased release of greenhouse gases into the environment. This consequently contributes to global warming, and if you're anyone but Donald Trump, you'll care about that. If this information shocks you, you are not alone. The abusive environment that livestock are being raised in is atrocious, and there are simply not enough measures in place to ensure that consumers are not ingesting potentially harmful substances. Consumers are being told lies of omission in grocery stores, as they are not being made aware of any of these potential dangers. I will be conducting my supermarket tour in the meat aisle of Metro, because it is a 24-hour grocery store, which is very convenient, and it's one of the grocery store chains that tends to market itself as carrying fresh products that are made just for consumers. I expect to find a variety of meat and cut options that look well preserved. I expect minimal labeling, with no information about potential antibiotics, hormones, or toxins that may be present in the product, nor any information about the source of the meat. Okay, so ready or not, here we go! Okay, so here I am in front of Metro. Let's go in.
You got a reputation for yourself now. Every other day you order takeout. If they messing up your order, got me stressed out. I'm trying to lose weight and get skinny, but with you,
A big topic in the supermarket tour is that of consumer manipulation. The book specifically discusses the fact that supermarkets these days are trying to make their stores a one-stop consumer experience and trying to sell them a vast array of products besides just food products. So for example, as you can see, I'm standing in the flower section of a supermarket right now, and I'm surrounded by flowers, glassware, stuffed animals, basically all you could ever need besides what you came here to shop for. We're walking up to the fresh meat aisle in the store right now. Though it's a relatively small section of the entire store, it contributes to world hunger in a very large way, as beef cattle overgrazing contributes to desertification, while 800 million people in the world are suffering from hunger and malnutrition. Today's shopping experience consists of consumers passively looking at products and picking them up and eating them without thinking about what they're really putting into their bodies. For example, we're going to focus in on a typical consumer browsing the meat section and see what his consumer habits are like. One thing that's worth mentioning is the fact that all of the meats are cut up into extremely small portion sizes, such as this one, which is pork cubes. This is done specifically in order to prevent the consumer from being aware of the fact that these came from actual animals. Okay, so one of the topics the supermarket tour talks about is the issue of food labeling. As was mentioned in the meat aisle chapter of the book, animals can be pumped with many hormones, antibiotics, or toxins, and consumers aren't aware of that fact. For example, on this pork tenderloin, it talks about safe handling instructions for consumers, but all it says is that the product may contain bacteria that could cause illness if it's mishandled or cooked improperly, which is basically putting the entire onus on the consumer as to talk about any number of the safety concerns that goes along with raising these animals and feeding them improper substances. The supermarket tour discusses the fact that 6 pounds of beef uses the same amount of resources needed for 100 pounds of grain. That's like a whole knee of grain. Okay, I'm not 100 pounds, but still. Consumers need to think more critically about where their food comes from. I feel like the lives of human beings have become so fast-paced that it's like we're running at full speed all of the time. So, of course, when you're running at full speed, everything becomes sort of a blur. And so you're not always going to see the details of everything around you. It's not until a stop sign comes flying up in front of you and you run into it and hit your face that you're truly forced to look at it. I feel like reading the supermarket tour was like getting hit in the face for me. I learned from this experience that I and everybody needs to think seriously about where the food we put into our bodies every day comes from. You wouldn't pour poison down your throat. You wouldn't torture an animal with your bare hands. You wouldn't pour greenhouse gases on the earth and laugh maniacally as it heats up, because that's ridiculous. So then why are we ingesting food that's manufactured by doing all of those things? The next time I'm going to purchase a meat product or any product from a grocery store, I will definitely be asking myself, where did this come from? How was this animal treated? Will I get sick if I eat this? And you should too.